We have children who are blind. We have children, young people who have visual impairments. And we also have children and young people who have vision and hearing loss, so they have dual sensory impairments. So that's why the introduction is a specialist school for sensory impairment and other needs. We meet a range of diverse needs. The school itself is situated in the city of Liverpool, West Derby, and we cater for around about 50 children in the main school campus, along with post-19 colleges and other areas as well. So throughout this presentation, you can stop at any time, you can ask some questions. I've tried to frame this around physical education because that's my field. We'll go into some areas that may be a little bit more complex. We'll also discuss some simple modifications as well. But if you've got any more general questions around visual impairment and teaching and learning, I'll do my very best to answer them as we go along as well. So Sarah Ryan, could you go on to the second slide, if that's okay?
Yes, definitely.
And I'll also keep the chat box open as well. So that's interesting that someone already has a school with 2 visually impaired children in it, so that some of this may be useful. So just as an introduction point, I think it's important to realise that children with visual impairments, they are born with the same potential as their sighted peers. Yeah, so that starting point for children is they have the same potential as the sighted peers. And really, one of the most important things is that having a visual impairment shouldn't really affect children and young people to be physically active. We have this perception that physical education is unsafe for disabled children. It's actually the opposite. We're proving that it is safe, and really we should be reducing the barriers for children and young people to be physically active. However, research here in the United Kingdom, I haven't been able to do a lot of research globally or in Malaysia, so forgive me about that, but the research tells us that children with visual impairments are not meeting recommended physical activity levels. So that means really they are not as active as their sighted or able-bodied peers. And we'll go into that a little bit more detail later on. Recent studies have also shown us, here in the UK, we call it the fairness gap. And it's that gap between disabled people and non-disabled people. And there seems to be a real gap. And that means the fairness gap, really, it impacted during the COVID pandemic. We all know that the detrimental impact that the COVID-19 has had. I don't always like to go back to it, but it's created this gap and this divide between how active disabled children and young people are and how active their able-bodied and sighted peers are. So that fairness gap is widening, which means more work needs to be done in order to enable better opportunities for disabled young people. And then activity levels in general within the VI population are probably the lowest amongst most disability groups. So I'm not too sure of the peers we've got here, but we may have some peers who may have wheelchair users, we may have children with autistic spectrum disorder, hearing impairments, profound and multiple learning difficulties. But within the VI population and blindness, they have the lowest level of physical activity. So not only do we have visual impairment, we have a low prevalence disability. So low prevalence meaning that there's only a small population of the global population that have a visual impairment, therefore it's not commonly known. So that amongst the fairness gap, there's still a lot of work to be done. Okay, so that's just some kind of basic introduction points in terms of in reference to the UK, but hopefully some of this as we develop and we chat through this, we can transfer to your settings. Okay, Shiraz, do you want to go to the third slide, please? How long do I have? What time do we have? An hour? Do we have a day? How long do we have for the presentation?
It's up to you, Mr. David. Basically, we are very free here because it's Friday night in our.
That's right. I'll try and keep it. That's not problem. I'll try and keep it to no longer than an hour. Then we can do some questions and things like that if needs be. Okay, so visual impairment. I've noticed that we've got some colleagues that have got visual impairment students in their school. So apologies if I'm teaching you things that you already know. So some basic understanding of visual impairment. We have functional vision. So a functional vision is how the child or young person will use their sight in everyday situations. So using the sight that they have to the best of their ability. Ocular visual impairment, meaning one or more parts of the functioning eye may not work properly. So that's an ocular visual impairment. So we have damage to the eye. And then we have a cortical, or more commonly known as cerebral visual impairment, where we don't have damage to the ocular eye, but the processing in the brain is common, and then that causes the visual impairment. So historically, we'd refer to that as cortical visual impairment, but as science has developed, we now know that it's very rarely that the brain is damaged in isolation. Therefore, the cerebral visual impairment has changed. So whilst we're at this point, if you want, does anyone want to just note into the chat box what you think the most common type of visual impairment is? If you want to just put it in the chat box, what do you think the most common type of visual impairment is? As a question to get started. What do you think? You want to write it into the box. Would we be able to do that?
Okay.
Siraj?
Okay, yeah. So everybody, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 types of visual impairment. And which one is it that you think is very common, right? Especially in our country. So you can type your answer in the chat, or you can always unmute and turn on your mic and speak up. So somebody said CVI.
Yep.
Is the most common one in India.
Great, yeah.
How about yours, Miss Cynthia? You have 2 students with visual impairment at your school. Are you able to identify their conditions?
They are actually totally blind.
Okay, yeah. So Braille users, yeah. Excellent. Anyone else want to drop something in the box to have a little guess?
So is there any other response, teachers? You can always, which one is it that you think is very common in Malaysia? Sure you know some who have visual impairment.
Okay. So somebody said Yen Chu.
B1.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, so B1 to B2 is the sight classification system. So B1 would be a child with no vision, so that's very similar to Miss there. Yeah, B1 and B2 is no light perception, so that would be someone who's completely blind. Yeah, so that makes sense to me, B1, B2. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, I won't take up much more time there. Okay, so really what the science, so thank you for those colleagues who put B1 and B2. That sits under, in the UK, we call it a sight classification, especially for sport. But what the research is telling us now is that the most common type of visual impairment is actually cerebral visual impairment. Yeah. We have a perception that we think it's ocular. It's not. The most common type, the highest prevalence of type of visual impairment, and probably globally now in the world, is CVI. We estimate here in the UK that we think around about 1 in every 30 children in the UK may have CVI. What that means is that for every mainstream classroom in the UK, there is a chance that 1 child may have CVI, and that is and CVI is on the increase. That's not to say that the prevalence of oculovisual impairment may not be increasing, but we just know now that CVI is now starting to increase, and there are some overlaps between children and young people in the UK who may have been misdiagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. So the most common type is CVI, but completely understand the B1, the B2 sight categories in terms of vision. So thank you for those who commented on that. I think it's really important to also mention that a child with CVI will present as having normal visual acuity. So on that 4th point there, when I'm talking about visual acuity, a young person can present with good visual acuity, but they will see things differently if they have a cerebral visual impairment. And we can go into that in a little bit more detail later on. And especially for mobility and independence and walking around and navigating your streets and taking part in sport and physical activity, visual fields are also very important. That's, the degree in which you can see in terms of a fixed point without moving your head. So would that be peripheral vision, visual field upper and lower? So that's what we mean by visual acuity. So just to recap, functional vision, ocular visual impairment, cerebral visual impairment. They are 2 different types of visual impairment: visual acuity and visual field. Simrat, could you go to the 4th slide if that's okay?
Okay, yeah, next slide.
Okay, so this is a really exciting piece of research now that's just coming out. This will go live. This will go live in January 2024. It is from a lady in New Zealand. This is called the Austin Assessment Tool. It's a specific screening tool to try and screen children who may have CVI. Okay, and it's really straightforward. You'll be able to download it from January, and you can use a tablet device or an iPad. And what this does, it's a very simple game where children can match different colored cards, and we have here level 3, level 4. I've given you an example, and it tracks the children's eyes. Okay, because obviously we're thinking about cerebral visual impairment, we're thinking about that connection between the brain, so it's the dorsal and ventral stream processing that takes the signals to the eye to process. So what this Austin assessment does, it enables us to start to screen children who we think may have some visual difficulties. Okay, so we just flick to the next slide. So that would be great. And what I've done for the purpose of this presentation, sorry, it's quite small print. I've set out some examples of how the game would be used. So you may have a class of children within the mainstream setting. You may have some children who you might think may have some visual processing difficulties. Maybe they're struggling to catch a ball. Maybe they're bumping into things. Maybe their lower visual field is becoming a little bit distorted and they're tripping over things. These are all signs that a child may have visual processing difficulties. And what I've just put on that slide for later reading, I won't read through all this evening because it is late in Malaysia and I appreciate that you'll be able to go through and look at some of those things, darting eye movement, being easily distracted, may find certain things, levels of frustration if you find things difficult, and difficulty with guided movements and visual guided movements. Children with CVI really struggle with busy environments, lots of clutter, lots of mess. They really struggle to process that. And like all special education needs, like all disabilities, CVI is so unique to each child, as is an ocular visual impairment. But they're just some of the kind of basic areas to look out for. So that's information there on that slide for you. If we could go to slide 6, please, Siraj. Sorry if I'm pronouncing names wrong. Okay, so we've covered CVI, we've covered some testing. What's really interesting in the UK at the moment is we have this conception of perceived motor competence and skill competence in children, okay? So our perceived motor competence is how we think we're going to move. Children have, the best way to put it is when babies and children are young, they don't care about making mistakes. They'll roll their sleeves up and they'll get involved, they'll run, they'll jump, they will think that they can do all these activities, and they can. As they gradually get older, their perceived motor skill competence naturally declines, because realistically the skills that they feel they may have may not be developing at the rate in which they think it should. Okay, they're becoming a bit more self-conscious of how they look and how they move, and we'll come into that again. So what I put on this slide for you, it's some really, it's not great reading, if I'm honest. In the UK alone, we're looking at 91% of children and young people with a visual impairment during their free time involved in sedentary activity. So sedentary activity meaning not moving, not doing anything, sedentary, still. 91% of free time is spent being still, not moving. Video game, well, not even video games for VI, but possibly no peer groups, no activities to be involved in, no local communities, no swimming. So 91% is a massive percentage. I'm not too sure what it is in Malaysia. I haven't had time to check, but that level of sedentary activity is not good for our health and well-being. So we need our young people with visual impairments moving more and engaging in quality physical education. The data also told us that physical education, school environments are the most common place where VI young people were reported to be most active. That is interesting because as educators and facilitators, we should be able to create an environment that's inclusive for all our students, whether they have a visual impairment or not, or a hearing impairment or not. So that's telling us there that there's an issue, there's a disconnect between what goes on in schools and what happens outside in their community. So we may be able to get our children active and engaged in school, but there's something going on outside of school. And that's for a whole other discussion around the support that they need, the clubs that are on offer, the knowledge and expertise of the people in their community, and in order to help them engage in and support. And then a lot of my work is qualitative, and it suggests that, you know, the best environment for engaging children more physically active is in education settings, as we've discussed. I'm going to draw on this in a little bit more because we're going to talk a little bit about testing now and where we have to change. Siraj, has anyone got any questions yet, or are you happy for me to continue?
Okay, yeah. So does anyone have any questions? So if you have any questions, you have any feedback, just use the chat, type your questions or your feedback there, and Mr. David will be able to address it. All right. So I think you can just continue. Mr. David, so Mr. David might just continue, but in case if you have anything on your mind, you can just drop it there, and then we'll look at it back. Okay. So it should be all right.
That's great. Thank you for that. And apologies. I am Scottish, so I do speak very fast. I'm trying to speak as slow as I can. Sorry. If we could go
Mr. David, you speak very fast, definitely. So obviously, all of us here, we are not native speakers, so we don't speak that fast.
Yeah,
I think I'm not. Yeah. I think it's the Scottish accent too makes it a little hard for us.
I do apologize. I do apologize. We can do. Thank you, Siraj. I do apologize. Attendance. Okay, well, I'll think about that in a second. Attendance and
So that attendance will be later. Okay, it's something for the teachers. It's for the continuing professional development credit points. That's what they are asking.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we can go to slide 7 then.
Yeah. Just wait. Miss Cynthia, you are raising your hand. Do you have anything to
Yes.
say? Okay.
I wonder if I don't know if I was able to miss the meaning of this, but I was wondering what CYP means.
Yeah, so
It's
CYP.
new, it's new. I think it's new for us, so we would like to know what CYP means.
Children and young people. So that's age 5 to 25 in our setting.
Okay, so note that. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Okay, so slide 7, please, Siraj, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we tend to do when we test, and I'm sure that some colleagues in this chat will be aware of this, we have standardized testing, don't we? So if I was to give everyone on the spot a times tables test or a spelling test or a test on trigonometry or mathematics or whatever it was, it's a standardized test and there is an output, isn't there? So you get a score out of 10 out of 10. I might get 3 out of 10. The issue with standardized testing in terms of movement with children with visual impairment or disabled children alone is that it becomes what I'm framing as ableist. Okay, it's ableism. We have this perception that disabled children and children with visual impairments will move like their sighted and able-bodied peers. Some may, but the majority won't. What I put up here for you is just a picture and an image in terms of some of the tasks that you might do to test how a child moves. Now, this isn't for a disabled child. This is for all children, okay? So it's called a BOT2 test, okay? So you might test manual dexterity. You might test how a child will catch and throw. You might look at static and dynamic balance. Can they balance on one foot? Can they hop on one foot? And what this does is this identifies delays or impairment in motor development, okay? So there's some, I've got some issues around this and a lot of practitioners have, and we'll go on to this in more detail as we develop. But ultimately what this test does, it creates a standardized normal data that we expect children with a visual impairment to fit into, and they don't fit into that category, okay? We are setting them up to fail. So we need to be more creative on the tests for movement in which these children have to take part in, or even if they have to take part in them. So if we move to the next slide, Siraj, I'll just draw everyone's attention. You might struggle to see this. I can get a link for you. This is a really good piece of work by a colleague in Germany of mine, Martin Gies, Justin Hegel, who's in the Old Domingo University in the USA, and Professor Anthony J. Marr, who is Leeds Beckett University. And they've done quite a bit of research with human kinetics. And you can get this journal online. I can send a link later. The ableist underpinning of normative motor assessments and adapted physical education. What's basically being said there is we're arguing that these assessments force disabled children to try and behave like non-disabled students. Yeah, and we're not valuing their preferences or abilities. Okay, we're trying to fit them into a box, for want of a better phrase, that they don't sit. And more specifically, these types of motor assessments, maybe the tools and the criteria, possibly unintentionally, they may not mean it, we're highlighting what we can see as wrong or bad or faulty about that young person with a disability, how they look, how they move, you know, and that is reinforcing these ableist norms that we feel that they should be able to be in terms of the physical education setting. So what I've done this morning, just as a really, really quick example, I wasn't able, there's been no, I haven't done too much detail in this, but can everyone see the red dot on the top corner, on the top of that screen? Can everyone see it on that slide picture? I'm sure everyone can. There's a red dot in the center. Now, this is a test that sighted children and blind children are meant to carry out. It's a bot test, okay? It's a very simple test. They have to hit the target with a tennis ball. I've adapted it so the child is standing 3 meters away and they have to hit it. Some of you guys might struggle to see this, but you will see little yellow stickers all around that yellow dot. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
We can see
ultimately, only 2 of the children that I sampled this morning could hit that red dot. Okay, so that test is useless. It's pointless. They can't hit it. Yet we're expecting our children to hit that dot, and then there's standardized test on it. So that's the really quick example this morning that I did with some of my students when they were passing my office, that these tests, they're not fit for purpose for VI children. They are not fit for purpose. And it's looking more and working more with our children for them to be able to develop what's best for them. And we'll come on to that as well. I'm just looking at some of the questions. What is the best technique to improve motor skills for students with visual impairments plus autism? I hope I've kind of touched on that. One, I don't believe we should be putting children through those types of motor competence tests. I don't think they're fit for purpose for them. I think I would highly recommend you read this paper. It's an ableist critique. It's a really great piece of work by Martin, Justin, and Anthony, and that will answer a lot of your questions. So that hopefully that answers the one about motor competency. And it's not about improving their motor competency. It's about looking at what skills they have and how they develop them. Someone's put awesome most of the back. That's great. What are those things, techniques that we need to learn by handling students? Okay, so in terms of by handling the student, that would be sighted guides, long cane, one-to-one support. So I can answer more questions on that. I am wondering how I can teach a shade of colour to our VI students when they were born totally blind. Okay, so for a child who is born totally blind, what I'd suggest is if you're trying to introduce colour and shades of colour, make it practical. There has to be a multi-sensory approach to that. That young person will never see green, but if we can start to incorporate what that means in it, in terms of a sense of feeling and a sense of belonging, green grass, yeah, or something within your environment that can connect colour with a physical object. There has to be a sense of belonging in that. We can't just say this is red and this is blue if they can't see it. That just won't work. So really think about the student and their environment and how you can make it practical for them and realistic in terms of their life experiences. And obviously, a baby's development will be significantly delayed when they are born with a visual impairment. So consider that as well when you're giving them those skills. Siraj, go to slide 9.
Yes.
Okay, so really this will answer some of the questions in the box. Pre-teaching, tactile maps and grids, activity modifications, and instructional approaches, so using voice, tactile modelling, physical guidance, and mapping grids. So on the next slide, I'll talk you through this, and this is something I designed for my students, and you'll be able to see what I mean here. This will answer some questions. So if we go to slide 10.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right. So what this is here, this is something that I designed for our students. So we were struggling. We were really struggling with target spokes. Okay. So this is a game called Boccia. I'm not too sure. It's maybe a bit like Crown Bulls or Bowls. I'm not too sure if there's a similar sport in Malaysia. But ultimately, it is a target sport. Okay. So the white ball is the target, and it's reds versus blues. And the winner is ultimately the team who gets their shots closest to the target and the jack. The problem we had was we had children who had hearing impairments and visual impairments. And there was no way whatsoever for them to be able to navigate the game, the floor. So we developed this grid. Now, this grid is excellent for some of the colleagues who have got B1 and B2 students. This is a fantastic grid for Braille users. And ultimately, this enables them to read the grid with their fingertips like a brailler. So blue balls are rough, red balls are smooth, and the white target jack is raised. And as the children develop their skills in their game, they can start to plot that grid with their teacher or their coach or their LSA and start to read the game. This now means that simple target sports like this can be played with sighted children, with non-sighted children, children with autism, children who have a hearing impairment, and it's a completely inclusive grid. So I'd look into that. It's a game called Boccia. It's a great game to adapt. If you have any visually impaired students, you can create this on your own with some simple materials. It doesn't have to be a really fancy grid like this. You could use a piece of cardboard and lots of different materials and cut it up for the children, and they can design their own grid for the game. But it's a really nice way to reinforce sport with tactile learning. Okay, next slide. Okay, again, going back to that slide, some really simple activity modifications. So we can equipment, make it larger, make it softer, use bright colors for those children with low vision, and you may want to use some sound sources. So I'll show you a rugby ball that we're developing as well. Sound. Maybe adapt the rules, give children their own roles, change the space that you use, reduce the number of the class size. I know that can be difficult. Think about your playing area and facilities. You might change the size of it. Again, you might use a sound. Call and response is when a teacher calls to the student and the student may call back to navigate space. And then thinking about tactile boundaries. How can we use anything you can use to create tactile? It could be string on the floor. It could be textured paper. It could be high contrast colors with texture, just so they have a sense of that space that they're in, or maybe for some children who have no vision. So that's really some really basic activity modifications there for you. Slide 12.
Wow.
Okay, so what I've done here is we had students who were playing rugby. Is there rugby in Malaysia?
Yes. It's quite popular here.
Excellent. So what we had is we had a real challenge again with children wanting to play rugby. So what I've designed is an iRugby ball. So you'll see on the image that we've created a tactile haptic ball. So this ball has textures that we discussed, so it can be rough and smooth. It also emits sound, so you can click either side of the ball and it will give a different audio pattern. So then each player knows who has and who hasn't got the ball. It's very tactile. There's a lot of multisensory elements to it, and it allows the child or the student to start to experience what it's like to travel with a rugby ball, to throw and catch a rugby ball, encouraging that movement. And then we've created some tags as well, some touch tags where children can play simple games and snatch each other's tags and play together, maybe in the playground or in the field. From that, what we've then been able to work on is have our children design their own lesson plans. So they've become the mini teachers themselves. They've thought, right, what lessons could I create to share with my peers? So if we change to slide 13, I've given you a really basic example, a nice introduction example of a lesson that our students designed. So I didn't write this. This was from the student's perspective, and that's on slide 13. Okay.
Wow, that's impressive.
You'll struggle. Yeah, you'll struggle to see this. I do apologize, but when you get your full copy, you'll be able to look at this. So this was developed by our students. So it gives you some of the equipment you might need, and you'll see here in reference to B1 and B2 and B3. So that goes back to some of the colleagues' comments. Our children developed this together, and this is a really nice, simple activity on how to start to move with the ball and pass to each other, increase the confidence, use your communication, and it sets out some basic equipment that you might need. But it's really important to note here that I didn't write this. This was written by my students, and we interpret it into the word format for them. This is their voice. This is how they wanted to develop their lesson with rugby, and they did this with their peers. Okay, so that's just a nice example there for you to possibly use. Okay, and then on the next slide, on slide 14, I've tried to give you, when we talk about instructional approaches, this is from an ocular perspective. This is not from a CBI perspective. We could argue the third image. Yeah, the two middle images could be CBI, but I've put this together with ocular, okay? What I'm trying to demonstrate here is if we look at the first slide, there's a clear picture. We know it's a basketball net. We know there's a basketball. We know there's a backboard. Yeah, it's a clear image. We can play a shot. As that sight deteriorates, we need to be thinking about how we would adapt that sport, okay? So if we go to the fourth image with no vision, a B1 student, as teachers, as professionals, how could we adapt that? So that's my next task. Okay, so you've got 2 minutes, if you wish, just to write in the chat box how you would possibly adapt a game of basketball for a student with no vision. Would that be possible? Okay, so you have a small class, the lesson is basketball, well, we can call it basketball if you want, and you have to teach a skill or activity to a child with no vision, B1. What could you do? You can write it in the chat box if you want.
Okay, yeah. So everybody, so think about that. Mr. David just asked a question. He just gave us a situation. If you are teaching students with no vision at all, they are not able to see at all, and you are teaching them on how to play basketball, which is something that people play also in Malaysia and in the Philippines. So how are you going to adapt? Is it this lesson, Mr. David, or come up with any lessons of their own?
You can use basketball if it'd be easier to use a sport more or an A lesson. Yeah, if you want to choose a different lesson, that's fine. It was just an example.
Okay, yeah. So let's just keep it that way. It's a basketball, but yeah, how are you going to teach children with B1 with no vision? So I'm sure a lot of you have your own innovations or approaches. So you may share here how you're going to teach, how are you going to adapt your lesson. Okay, think about equipment, space, stuff, sound, and approaches. Okay, Mr. David. Yeah, we might need some time, Mr. David, for the teachers to respond.
No
so think
problem,
about that.
Problem. We can think about that.
Okay.
And if you want to make it after.
So obviously, I can speak Malay language. If you guys have any questions, and if you are not really confident in English, you can always speak to me in Malay. Let me just look at the teachers here. Let's see.
Okay, I've just seen a question there. Sorry, I missed the question, so I'll just write. I've got a question here from Bong Yen about goal ball, so I'll just reply to that now. So yeah, I'll write about that. Yeah, so we have goal ball in the UK. Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask Miss Cynthia and her teachers. I know you guys are very, very creative and energetic. So I'm sure you guys have some ideas, Miss Cynthia.
So that's just for Bo Yang about goal ball.
Okay, yeah.
Comment there.
Okay, yeah, we have some answers already. Thank you so much, everybody.
So that, yeah.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, excellent. Guides 1-to-1. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, yeah, Lauren's a good comment there, Lauren's, about using mainstream peers to help with guiding and that relationship and that friendship group. That's really good. Shooping, yeah, adjustable hooks are good. Sound as well for that kind of feedback is excellent. And then again, one-to-one guides where appropriate. Bong Yen, in terms of, especially for the lower basket, we've got to think of maybe for a child who has damage to the upper visual fields, if we can change the levels, that's excellent. Adapted line on the basketball court, so that could even be on the floor, so children can position their feet independently in relation to the basket or the net. It allows them to independently navigate that, so that's really good. Instructions in terms of steps, again, is also excellent, because then you're thinking about what we call here in the UK pacing. So that child can think about how many steps it is to the basket, or they can move independently, they can have a sense of that space. So that's excellent. I think that's enough. Colour and movement, as well. Again, if they're in a class where it's maybe more than 5, 10, 15 children, you may have to differentiate that with colour in different areas. The high-vis vests as well, so the low vision student can access his or her peers and where they are. Tactile ball, great. Sound ball in a ring, great. Guided by voice would be interesting, because you're thinking about a hall or a space. It's great. Sound to lead the shooting ball, excellent. These are all great examples. Siraj, they're great. Thank you for that. These are all great. Okay, shall we move to slide 15, Siraj?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Great, thank you very much. Well done, everyone. Okay, this is going to be a little bit. This is some of my research now. I'm just about to write a book for Routledge. It will be published next year. I will send some articles from that soon. I'm not going to read into this. We're getting into a complex narrative now and discussion around co-production. So what I mean by co-production is involving the child with a disability from the start through the process to the end of the process. That is what co-production is, okay? It's a little bit different from co-design. They are two different things, okay? Co-production begins with the young person, yeah, and their experiences and their lived experiences being a VI or a disabled young person, and they follow that piece of work through. Co-design, they may be involved in the project at the later stage. So you may be developing a product, you may have a prototype, and then you want the disabled person to test that after it. That is not co-production, okay? That's more co-design. So I put some notes there for you to have a little read. But ultimately, the main piece of the way I collaborate and the way I use co-production is the third point: equitable and experientially informed research. Okay, that involves the young person. So that's where I sit within my research. And this type of co-production, ultimately, it's shared knowledge and it's valid. Yeah. And we're listening to the disabled person. We are listening to their voice. We are trying to work with them through their lived experiences to improve their outcomes. It is not me telling the disabled person what to do. It is me listening to the disabled person and facilitating with them. That is what I mean by co-production. At the very start of this presentation, I talked a little bit about the physical activity levels of children who are disabled in the UK, especially VI, and that many of these children were not meeting the recommended levels of physical activity. We have organisations such as the WHO, the World Health Organization, who have put some gold standards down that children must be active for 60 minutes a day, etc. So what I've done with the UK government, with a piece of co-production, if we go to slide 16, Siraj, slide 16 will give you a really nice example of how co-production has been used to create brand new physical activity guidelines for disabled children. Okay, so this is now, you can get this on this, you can get a copy of this on the UK Gov website. Yeah, you can get a copy of this on the UK Gov website. And what we're saying now in the UK, that 20 minutes of physical activity per day for disabled children is what we should be aiming for in bite-sized chunks. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at lunchtime, maybe 10 minutes. That is the number we are looking at now. So this is brand new. It's only been released for a couple of years, but this is that you can get all the information on this. So we are now saying 20 minutes per day. Yeah, for disabled children. Okay, if we move to slide 17.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, summer camps. Summer camps are a great way to get children active. When school closes, we open up here in Liverpool every summer with summer camps for children and young people with visual impairments. What I've put for you, this is a research paper that I've written. It'll be published in March 2024 in the British Journal of Visual Impairment. I will send a PDF copy to Siraj so he can have it and he can distribute it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this, sorry, let's research paper will be published in March. Okay, so this will be published. So what we're trying to do as part of our research is look at summer camps to help us inform our work. So the children are, it's qualitative data. We're doing lots of questions, lots of activities, but ultimately what we've found, the outcomes for summer camp is these types of activities are great for the visually impaired young people to socialize and learn from their friends. Yeah. To be able to develop key skills such as teamwork and leadership and independence, as well as increasing their confidence in a safe environment. And that's important. Physical activity is safe and a real safe environment for them to engage in. It's really important now that we develop this and we offer this so that we can share, like with our peers, some of our international research to help them inform maybe a Malaysia summer camp. Would you be able to hold a small summer camp for 20 VI children in Malaysia? What would it look like? What activities would you have? Yeah, and I'd be more than happy to help you with that and develop that internationally. So I'll just knock this in here. If you had a small summer camp for VI in Malaysia, what would you include?
Exactly. Okay, so that's good.
I just thought I'd put that in there for you, Siraj, because it'd be really interesting as a collective if maybe we could, who knows, maybe we could offer a small summer camp in Malaysia one summer and have some VI children attend and take part in activities. I think that would be really exciting.
Exactly. So everyone, Mr. David has just typed the question there on the chat. If we are organizing, or if you are organizing a summer camp for students with visual impairment in our country, Malaysia, or in the Philippines, we do have teachers from the Philippines here too, and from Indonesia. So what activities that you would like to include in the summer camp? So take into consideration sports, technology, sustainable development goals, health and well-being, dance, music, and arts. So take your time, teachers, and you may type your ideas in the chat. I don't see the screen anymore. Of course. Especially for the Filipinos, Miss Cynthia. I know you guys are the best when it comes to singing and anything related to entertainment. So I'm just going to try to share the slide again. I think it's not shown anymore. Sorry about that. Okay, everyone. So I'm to forgive me with the slideshow. I think I need to reshare. Okay, yeah, just keep thinking about it. Write your ideas there.
Okay, so as well, people are writing their ideas. That's fine. We can go to slide 18.
Obstacles, please.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a Sir Ken Robinson.
Yeah, yes,
That's interesting. Field day gives them where they can try their hands. Large screen and audio podcast. Yeah, audio podcast. That's interesting too.
okay. So just whilst other people are writing in some notes, don't worry if you haven't. As Siraj kindly noted at the beginning, I was very, very fortunate enough to be, cultural capital, excellent, excellent, international, cult.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's really important too.
Excellent. Yeah, lots of okay, so on slide 18, and 18, yes, 18. Siraj had mentioned at the start of the presentation, I was very fortunate enough to be a part of the top 10 Global Teacher Prize with UNESCO and Barkey Foundation. As part of my role now, I also do some ambassador work, and I get involved a lot. A lot of this came from an international project that I was working on, which is called Sightbox. This is this box here. And ultimately, this sight box is a box made up of lots of different sports equipment for the visually impaired, and we were sending that all over the world. So what I'm suggesting is if we were eventually maybe co-produce something, or I could visit Malaysia, or I could come to a VI school in Malaysia, this is the sorts of equipment that I'd be helping to develop with the schools and the activities and the curriculum development. And I put here reverse inclusion. What that means is the disabled child, the VI child, teaches and leads their non-VIPs. They become the specialists, they become the coaches, they become the teachers, and they teach us. Yeah, they have the lived experience. They know more than we do. They certainly know more than I do. And it's about giving the young people that freedom and expression to be able to lead for themselves. And that's what we do in terms of reverse inclusion. Mainstream children, sighted children being taught by their visually impaired peers. It's excellent because it disrupts that narrative of ableism that we're talking about in terms of standardization, and it really helps to increase that confidence and independence of the VI young person. And we've been very fortunate. He's since sadly passed, but if you haven't read any of Sir Ken Robinson's work, he was a good friend of the school, and especially Sir Ken's creative schools. I would read some of his books. They're fantastic books and articles. So I'd highly recommend read Sir Ken Robinson, creative. Highly recommend.
Yeah, exactly. That's a nice book.
Okay. Okay, and okay, and then the last slide, that's pretty much it, folks. I tried to keep it under 20 slides, so I went for 19. Sorry. Final thoughts. It's just a quote from Field and Brooks that I use. We know that seeing the world might be different for those with visual impairments compared to those with vision, but their perception is just as rich and varied, and that's important. Yeah, their perception is just as rich and varied, and that's really important. When we're working with disabled children, young people, they are at the heart of everything we do. Okay, they are ultimately the experts. Yeah, and we must work with them, okay, in order to improve their outcomes. So I just thought that was a really nice quote to end the presentation with. So thank you for listening. I hope some of you understood my Scottish accent. It's very fast. And I'm happy to take any questions. I've got another 15 minutes, so I can be available now for another 15 minutes.
So there are some questions right on the chat. And Miss Cynthia, you just raised your hand. I mean, obviously you can speak now.
Yes, sir. Thank you for acknowledging me. Since Mr. David specializes in developing the physical, the psychomotor skills of the visually impaired students, I would like to know if Mr. David is planning to create some videos showing how to apply those things that he had shared to us this evening, so that we maybe have an idea on how to do it actually.
Yeah. So I'd be more than happy to start to create some. Obviously, a lot of my thanks for the question. I cover so many different areas in the field, but we can certainly look towards maybe in the future, if you maybe thought of a specific area or sport that you wanted to develop, then we could create maybe some webinar videos, and so we can exchange them and students can learn from them and teaching staff can learn from them. Obviously, I'm quite restricted to 20 slides, but yeah, we could do some videos of bocce and how you use the grid and the basics of the game. What I'd advise is from my slide, you can research that a little bit further online, and you can read about bocce, and there'll be some videos online as well on YouTube, which would be excellent. You should find some on there. But I'd be more than happy to do that. Yeah. And who knows, I might even make it to Malaysia one year and be able to work with you with some students.
Yeah, you can always come to Malaysia, Mr. David. Miss Cynthia, she's from the Philippines. It's another Southeast Asian country.
Hi, Cynthia.
Okay, thank you for that.
So there is a question in the chat from Mr. Muhammad Akmal Rashid.
Yep. Okay, so first one, your thoughts, David, other participants. Does repetition more skill activity? Not necessarily, no. I think when I go back to my question, the problem we have, Mohammed, with motor skills, activities and tests is that they're not designed for disabled children. They're designed for able-bodied children. And that at the heart is what the issue is. I think we completely need to reform how we test children. We're trying to develop these skills based on a standardized able-bodied test, if that makes sense. It doesn't, our young people don't fit this. It's like, so if we want to repeat like the throwing activity that I said, that child may never be able to hit that. He or she could repeat it 100 times and they may never be able to hit that target. We can either say they have failed, or do we focus on what they can do and what they can develop? So it's a real complex question. In terms of finding gross motor skills, that's different because we're talking about locomotive, aren't we? How the body moves. if we're talking about fine and fine motor skills, let's say in the fingertips, repetition of braille reading we know will develop and increase, because a child may not be able to read braille, then they repeat the code of braille and then they can develop that. So they're two different things. We have motor skills in terms of how the body moves, and then fine gross motor skills, which may be related to teaching in terms of braille and accessing braille. Other question, shooting the ball to ring, repetition. That answers the same question, really. It could improve their accuracy. It will likely, possibly improve their accuracy. But that, again, in terms of the adaptations, where is the ring? How high is it? If you have a wheelchair user, if you have a child who may have problems with their rotator cuff or their shoulder, they might not be able to throw it high. So you're thinking about all your adaptations before you do your repetition work as well. So don't set them up in the wrong environment and then do the repetition. Think about the environment, think about the resources they need, make sure they can access them, and then possibly implement some of your repetition work. Superb, and respect to Malaysia. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you. So let's admit. Can you ask in Malaysia language and I can?
That's me. I was telling the participants.
Okay, sorry. David, what are some of, if not? Okay, so that last question, you're looking at a VI child in a mainstream setting. My recommendation would be think of the context. So think about the lesson that you are delivering. So the curriculum here in the UK will be possibly different than Malaysia. So for example, if you're specifically talking about physical education, there are many. You can think about the resources. You might want to think about the peer group and how they interact with each other. If they're trying hands-on activities, you might want to give some sighted guide. But there are lots of different ways to do that. Could you be a bit more specific? Is there a particular subject or area you're considering? Is it PE?
Yeah, Miss Emily teaches English language.
English. Okay, so that's probably easier. Yeah, because that's easier. So English, mainstream teachers. So depending on the VI learners for English, I would always recommend thinking about how you're adapting the work. Yeah, font size, paper, braille. Be creative in the lesson. Think about, could you do field recordings? Could you do audio recordings? Could you do recitals? Could you vlog it as a podcast and to engage with their mainstream peers? You know, young people with visual impairment, some of them love to be creative through different means and technologies. It could be a phone recorder, a field recorder. It doesn't have to just be reading from text. They can be creative in that sense. Maybe do it through dance or poetry, or a case study. We talked a little bit about the environment. Maybe in English, they are discussing about the misuse of single-use plastics in Malaysia and the impact it's having on our environment. How can they do that in terms of a text or through a piece of music or poetry or a field recording? Maybe they could be mini news reporters. Maybe they could take different roles. One could be interviewed, one could be the presenter. Think about the different roles they may play in the classroom. They might create a little news set and there's a news bulletin and they're discussing the actions that they need to take, and they're doing a little bit of a running commentary, or they're gathering some basic research and they're connecting that to some of the work they're doing in the environment. I hope that kind of makes sense. I hope that helps. Okay, in terms of assessments, what assessment? Are we talking about reading assessments, maths assessments, PE assessments? Written. So, yeah, written assessment, it would be, the written assessments would be standardized based on Malaysia. So, standardized based on I'll keep answering the questions, typing, Siraj, it might just be easier.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Thank you for this. Is there any questions from the participants? So, Mr. David, if you have any books or any materials that they can subscribe or they can purchase, you can always share the links with me, or you can write those links you can type those links on the board, on the chat.
Yeah, Shiraz, I try not to. I'm not looking to sell anything, so everything I share you can have free access to.
Okay.
So what I will do is I'll send you a link to the curriculum framework. Just a second. Here. So this is a useful link. Coming through now.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
That's a nice one. This is an article. This is an article I wrote for the UK SEN mag. This is worth a read.
Wow. The link to. No, let me see here. Copy link. So everybody, you just stay here because we're going to post the link. We're going to post the link for the Esper KPM and the feedback one later. Okay, the feedback form and then the continuing professional development credit point for KPM. Okay. So yeah, that's really nice. It's very impressive, Mr. David, of what you did. I think I find it very inspiring.
Thank you. But any other link, I can send you. I've got a few publications coming out next year. I've got some journals and some book chapters. I will send you links to them when they come out. They're just going through publishers now. But yeah, it'd be great maybe in the future if I will try my very best to visit Malaysia somewhere. Maybe connect me with a school, maybe a school for disabilities, and I'll try and arrange a trip.
Yeah. So Mr. David, you must be tired too, and I'm sure everybody has started to get wary. It's Friday night, so I think we can end the session now. But before that, for those who are participating, you just have to wait for a while. We will post the links for the continuing personal development credit points, as well as the feedback forms which you need for the certificates. All right. And for the Malaysian teachers, you heard David. He is very interested to come in Malaysia, and as you know, he is a top 10 finalist for Global Teacher Prize in 2021. So that's an amazing feat. He has done a lot. He has done all these innovations, which in Malaysia, our Ministry of Education always encourages us to do innovations, and he has done a lot of research as well. So the rigor is there. His work is very rigorous, and it's research based and research baked. And you know, in Malaysia, our Ministry of Education has encouraged us to do action research, and we can go further by delving more into research to make sure that our work is data driven. And he has done that. That's very impressive too. And he's writing a book as well. So I think Mr. David, what you did, that's very impressive. I find it to be very inspiring, and it's something that everyone aspires to do, especially Malaysian teachers. And you definitely deserve to be in the top 10 finalists of Global Teacher Prize. So I'd like to congratulate you for that. And
you.
everyone, can we just turn on your camera so we can take group photo? I'm sorry, Mr. David, just for a while. That group photo is very important. That group basically is a screenshot of this whole. So can everyone turn your camera? Turn on your camera, yeah. And I'm just trying to. Okay, you can take your own shot too, and then you can send it to me. Okay, are you turning on your camera? Okay, let us check. Okay, so we need more people to turn on your camera. Okay, everybody. Yeah, that's majority.
Hello.
Yeah, you can say hi to Mr. David while waiting
Hi, Mr.
for people
David.
to turn.
Hello, David.
Yeah.
For your sharing.
Hello, Sir Iwan also.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so everyone, I'm going to count 1 until 3. So 3, you just do whatever pose, and I'll keep taking snaps of it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Mr. David. So Mr. David is very interested to come in Malaysia. So for Malaysian teachers, maybe we can work on something. We can work with the Ministry of Education, especially MBK, the Special Education Department of our Ministry of Education, to get Mr. David to come here. I think it's going to be really amazing with the skills that he has, the work that he has done. Those are very impressive, and we can learn so much with that. We teach students with visual impairments, or we teach non-disabled students. I'm sure whatever that he has been telling us, he has been teaching us, we can also put it into practice. Okay, say all the congratulations. Yep. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening. I know it's late now, so thank you for having me. And hopefully I'll visit soon and maybe see some of you in person and meet some of you in person.